In this video, we're going to take a look at the Kuryakyn LED battery voltage gauge, and then I'm going to install it on my Honda Guage. I've actually had the Kuryakyn battery voltage gauge previously installed on the Honda Guage, and this thing lasted for a few years and it finally just stopped working. On my way back from California, my LED digital battery voltage gauge that's located behind the speaker grill, it played out on my return home. About 10 miles into the trip, the battery voltage gauge just died. So for the life of me, I'm not sure why Honda did not install a battery voltage gauge on their flagship motorcycles. And that includes the newer Honda Guage as well. If you missed the video of me installing a battery voltage gauge on the new style Honda Guage, you can click on the link in the top corner. But in this video, we're going to take a look at this Kuryakyn LED battery voltage gauge, and then I'm going to install it on the previous generation Honda Guage. So let's get started. I will include in the description of the video a link to where you can pick up this battery voltage gauge for your Honda Guage. Came with some installation instructions. We have some installation instructions. We're not going to be using those. The installation is going to be actually very easy. So let's open up the battery voltage gauge and we're going to take a look at how it actually works. And it said, please remove protective film. So why is it so important to have a battery voltage gauge on your Honda Guage? Well, I'm glad that you asked. The reason why it's so important to have a battery voltage gauge on your Honda Guage is that you need to be able to see if the bike is running off the battery, and you need to be able to see if the charging system is working correctly. So if you do not have a battery voltage gauge on your Honda Guage, how do you know if your charging system is recharging the battery? How do you know that your motorcycle is not running off the battery because your charging system has failed? If you do not have a battery voltage gauge, you will not know until your battery voltage is so low that the bike will not crank, and then you're dead in the water and you're trying to figure out why your bike is not starting. So I highly recommend that if you are a Honda Guage owner or a motorcycle owner, that you install some type of battery voltage gauge on your motorcycle if your bike does not have a battery voltage gauge or a charging indicator. We have a red wire and a black wire. The red is going to go to the positive, black is going to go to the negative. I mean, this is so easy that even a caveman can do it. So the first thing that I'm going to do, I want to test and verify that the battery voltage gauge is actually working properly. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the wires so I can connect it to a power source and just verify that the battery voltage gauge actually works. So I'm going to take my 12-volt test battery. You can use your motorcycle battery or your automobile battery. I'm just going to use this little 12-volt battery, and I just want to verify that I'm getting a voltage reading on this gauge. So I'm going to hook my red to the positive. I'm going to hook my black to the negative. And I'm gonna turn off the light for just a moment. So when I hook this up to the battery, now it shows me that I have power on the gauge. And once the Honda Gold Wing starts running, the alternator will kick in and the voltage will climb up to about 14 volts. So now that I've tested the battery voltage gauge, now we can install this on the Honda Gold Wing. So this battery voltage gauge is no longer working, and my replacement Kuryakyn, I'm going to show you where I had this thing mounted. So if you look, I'm going to turn the handlebars. I had the battery voltage gauge. I'm just going to lay it down. I had it sitting on top of the frame. So when you're sitting in the cockpit, I can look directly down where the handlebars are located and I can see my battery voltage. So I already have some wire that I've ran up from the previous gauge, and I'm going to connect my multimeter, and I just want to verify that I have voltage. On your installation, you're going to have to run your Kuryakyn. You're going to have to run that wire down to the fuse box next to the battery, or you're going to have to run it to the battery. For my installation, I've already have the wires ran through the Honda Gold Wing. I just need to tie in to the existing wiring, but I'm going to connect my multimeter and just verify that I'm getting 12 volts when the bike is not running. And then I want to verify that it jumps up past 14 volts when the bike is running. My test leads tied into the existing wiring where I'm going to connect my battery voltage gauge. When I turn on the bike, I should show at least 12 volts. I'm getting 12.2. Once I actually crank the bike, it takes about a minute, and then the voltage is going to jump up to around 14.3, between 14.5, and that just means that the alternator is charging. So I'm going to crank up the bike and watch the gauge go up to just over 14. Here we go. We're going to give it a minute, and that gauge is going to jump up to about 14.3. So as you guys can see, I'm getting 14.29 volts, which means that the alternator is charging. When I cut the bike off, it's going to go back down to around 12 volts. So this just lets me know that my alternator is working. And this is why it is so important to have a battery voltage gauge on your Honda Gold Wing, because you need to be able to see if the bike is charging when you're riding and not running off of the battery. So this is where I'm going to connect my Kuryakyn battery voltage gauge. So I'm going to take my little connectors. I'm going to put one on the negative and one on the positive. And it's going to be hard to see, but I have a positive. I'm going to reach in and I'm going to twist those wires together. And that's the thing about working on a Gold Wing. You got to have baby hands, and there's no room to work, especially when you're trying to make a video. So hopefully you guys can see what I'm doing. Slide down my connector. And I'm going to heat up Heat up that wiring. Now I can connect my negative. I'll take my lighter, heat up that solder connection. And now that I have that connected, now I can turn on the bike and we're going to see if the battery voltage gauge lights up, and then we're going to start the bike and see if the voltages go over to 14 volts. So I'm going to turn on the switch. As you guys can see, it's working. I'm going to crank up the bike. Give it a few seconds. And it's in the green. Turn off the bike. Voltage drops. Cut off the bike. As you can see, the battery voltage gauge is working. And on the back of the battery voltage gauge, it has some two-sided tape. So when you stick your battery voltage gauge, depending on where you want to stick it, it comes with some two-sided tape. So you just want to make sure that you take some alcohol and clean the area where you're going to stick the battery voltage gauge. For my installation, I'm going to stick it down in this little area just below the handlebars. I'm going to take a little bit of alcohol and I just want to clean that area where I'm going to stick my battery voltage gauge, and I'm going to stick it right on the frame. I'm going to take my heat gun and I just want to heat that area. Two-sided tapes sticks better when the area is warm. So now that I have the area heated, now I can tuck my wiring underneath this cowling, the plastic cowling. Just gonna tuck it underneath. I'm going to take that double-sided tape. Just going to peel that double-sided tape, being careful not to get my fingerprints or oil on my finger. I want to make sure that I don't get that on the two-sided tape. And now I can stick this thing right about there. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video of me installing the battery voltage gauge on my Honda Guage. My bike was already pre-wired. All I had to do was connect to my existing wiring. If your bike is not already pre-wired for a battery voltage gauge, you're going to have to add some wiring, run it down the side of the bike, and connect it to the fuse box located next to the battery. Hook the red to the positive and hook the black to the negative. But for my bike was already pre-wired for my battery voltage gauge. So if you guys have any questions or any comments, you can put it down in the comment section below. If you like this video, click the like button. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you a little bit later out here in the Caliente garage.